On Facebook, so hopefully, I hope we will have some too. So now is 6 p.m. and if Veronica Valeria is
yes.
allowing us.
Yes.
And now the YouTube translation started, probably.
Yes.
So we can start. And first of all, I would like to say hello and welcome everybody who decided to dive into the universe of languages on this Friday evening. This discussion is part of traditional Vilnius University event Philologists Nights, and this year event takes place online. Many thanks to all the wonderful students who organized it and professors, lecturers who kindly agreed to be part of it. I hope that this discussion will reveal valuable insights into some possible approaches towards languages and maybe light up some of the viewers' curiosity for any aspect related to linguistics. As the name of our discussion suggests, a deep dive into the universe of languages, today we will talk about various aspects of linguistics. For example, how learning a new language affects our brain. Can we get any insights about particular culture from its language? What exactly do psycholinguists do? And our speakers today are well appreciated and well accomplished lecturers, professors from Vilnius University. When I say well appreciated, I mean their endless help for all the students. And when I say well accomplished, I mean their solid part into their own fields of linguistic research. Rūta Sirvydė, she is a lecturer at Department of Foreign Language Teaching and Research. Her research interests focuses in the field of psycholinguistics. She analyzes conceptual metaphor and metonymy. Good evening, Lecturer Sirvydė.
Hi, everyone.
Jurgis Pakerys, he is a professor at Department of Baltic Studies. He investigates fields of general morphology, history of linguistics, language typology. Good evening, Professor Pakerys.
Hi, thanks for having me here.
And Professor Axel Holvoet, he is head of the Center of General Linguistics. His research interests lay in the fields of general linguistics, grammatical semantics, and the historical syntax of the Baltic and Slavic languages. Also, Professor is a polyglot who knows about 7 languages. Good evening, Professor.
Good evening. Glad to be here.
And I, Eglė Žurauskaitė, a doctoral student and junior assistant at Department of Lithuanian Studies, will moderate this discussion. So, and all the questions from the viewers are very welcome in our comment section. Again, thank you all for being part of this discussion. And now, let's dive into the universe of languages. First of all, what is a language? There are quite a few different approaches towards it. Language as individually constructed social phenomenon, language as an innate, very complex phenomenon, as a tool for communication, a system defined by rules, window to understanding cultures, values, attitudes, well, everything. What approach towards language is most relevant to your own field, and what insights that approach offers? So maybe, I don't know, Jurgis Pakerys would like to start sharing.
Okay, yeah, I may start. Yes, of course, I would say language is a means of communication, but I really loved the cognitive turn in the linguistics, and thanks to this cognitive turn in linguistics, now we view language as part of our larger cognitive capacities. So I would say it's that our ability to communicate is part of our general cognitive abilities.
If I may add a few words here, it is perhaps not known to everybody, but linguists we are all linguists here. Linguists are interested not in just every language, just any language, They are interested in natural languages. What's a natural language? Well, the artificial languages of logic and mathematics are not natural languages. An artificially created language like Esperanto is not a natural language. On the other hand, for example, sign language, language used by people who can't hear, for example, it's a natural language, because a natural language is a language which develops naturally, spontaneously within the speech community, with the aim of allowing people to communicate. So we are interested in human language and only in natural language.
Yes.
So it naturally connects, as Jurgis said, with the cognitive sciences.
Yes, now from cognitive sciences and this side, psycholinguists, maybe Rūta, what's your approach?
Well, the beauty of linguistic diversity shows how flexible the human mind is. We've got around 7,000 languages around the world, and languages live their own life. That means that we have 7,000 universes around the world. And it's really pity and a shocking fact that some languages are endangered, and we lose every language every week. We lose one language, and that means that we are losing one universe. If there are no written languages, so then we lose the trace, actually, and this is really a great loss, because the whole humanity is encoded into a language. All languages reflect the reality, and it's quite interesting when we look at the diversity of it.
Yes, I am very happy that you mentioned that our languages, how we speak, reflect the reality. But what do you mean exactly? What does it mean that language reflects our reality?
Well, so every language encodes something, and a lot of expressions. A language is a very complex, structure. It includes phonology, it includes morphology, semantics, what else? Pragmatics. Lots of things are encoded, and all of them are in our brain. Our brain is a very complex system, and this is the most complex mechanism ever, I should say. And if you asked me, I would really say that a language is the greatest invention ever. Some people believe that this is electricity. Some people believe that this is a wheel. Some people believe that the internet. But if you ask me, I'm absolutely sure that this is a language, because thanks to language, we manage to transmit our knowledge. We manage to transmit our experience. And after all, we managed to progress, and our civilization is built only due to language. So everything that is invented, everything that is discovered is only due to language. So this is my point of view. I do not know whether you agree or not.
So in a way, it's language that makes us human. Is that the case? What would you say?
Yeah, that's right.
I heard, or remember as saying that maybe it's fair to say that we individually experience this objective reality, and our language like slices it by using different categories, like, for example, objects of reality we refer to as nouns, their specific features we refer to as adjectives, On top of that, various metaphorical usage of language maybe reveal certain attitudes towards specific concepts, but there are few languages in the world that they don't have, for example, nouns. How is it? How can it be? How does it work? How can they function? How can a language with system like category, we would say missing, would function? Is it?
If I may
Yes.
attempt to give an answer to this question, I would like to say, first of all, that all language have to perform similar functions. All over the world, people live in basically similar circumstances. They live in societies, they have families, they have, perform various kinds of economic activities to provide in their subsistence and so on. So they manipulate objects and they communicate with other people. So the tasks the language has to perform, they are always more or less the same. The strategies languages use to perform these tasks, they may vary. And here we do find a lot of variety, but I think all linguists would agree that this variety, this variation has some limits. And well, you mentioned nouns. Well, some linguists would say there are languages which do not distinguish nouns and verbs. So the same words could mean a farmer or to live as a farmer, according to the affixes you add. That's true, but on the other hand, all languages must have some kind of words that are able to refer to the things, to the objects, or to the people in our surroundings. Yes. So the claim that there are languages without nouns, for example, is somewhat doubtful. I would agree if you said adjectives, because you can live actually very well without adjectives. If you have no adjective that means clever, you can say you can make a verb which means to be clever, or you can say she is with cleverness, and that would mean she's clever.
Yes, thank you.
So there are boundaries to variation in language.
Yes, and also you mentioned that tasks, we perform tasks with languages, of course, and we have to use different strategies in performing different tasks in different languages. So for you, as a polyglot, how many languages you said you speak, and did you experience yourself that you would maybe use different strategy with other language that you're speaking, or how, in your own experience, how it would reflect this thought?
Well, there's a joke about a doctor who met a linguist, and the doctor said to the linguist, "Oh, you're a linguist, how many languages do you speak?" And the linguist answered, "Oh, you're a doctor, how many diseases do you have?" So I'm not here as a polyglot. I must basically, linguists work with languages they don't know, they don't speak, they actually don't know a lot about. Because, well, the object of the study for a linguist is basically all languages of the world. That's, of course, not very realistic, so you always have to work with a certain sample of languages which you hope will be more or less representative. And then you study grammars and you ask people, how do you say that in your language? So being a polyglot and being a linguist, these are different things.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Was it easy for you to learn so many languages? How long does it take to master a new language for you personally?
A whole life, basically. Well,
because I found quite an interesting interesting fact for some recommendations of the Foreign Service Institute for English native speakers. If you want to learn a language, for example, which is of Latin origin, you need at least 24 weeks, 600 hours. If you want to learn German, you need 30 weeks, 750 hours. If you want to learn an absolutely different language, Indonesian, Malaysian, or Swahili, you need to learn 900 hours. And Albanian, Vietnamese, Thai, Russian, Lithuanian probably, is 1100 hours. And finally, Arabic, Japanese, Mandarin, and Korean, 2200 hours. So when you managed to learn Lithuanian, probably it was really challenging.
Well, I think Lithuanian was category 2. It's not comparable to Mandarin or what was it, Japanese. Well, I don't know. There are probably many factors that determine the ease or the difficulty with which one acquires a language. But it's also a fact that it's a fact which we do not yet understand very well. That some languages are simply simpler than other languages, and why this is, it's not really clear.
Yes.
Because a simple language is not a primitive language, of course. Many people who are not linguists are inclined to think that there are more developed languages and primitive languages, which must necessarily be simple. But that's not really the case.
Well, I think Axel, Professor Holvoet mentioned that about different difficulty of learning different languages, different difficult level, and but I am more curious to learn about the processes involved in learning languages. What, why bother studying new language if I am, for example, well, because nowadays, especially for people who speak lingua franca languages, for example, English, some of them wouldn't see necessity to learn other languages, but I don't know, maybe Rūta or Jurgis or Axel, what are the processes, benefits, or maybe minuses in learning different languages? We see how many time we need to spend.
Okay, I could answer the question from the point of view of psycholinguistics and how brain functions while we are learning a language. There was a joke that if English was good for Jesus, why should I learn another language? So I'm not sure whether I can share my screen, but I have several visuals, and then I could show you just some slides on language in the brain. Just a minute, a second probably. Sometimes when we speak, we do not realize what a magical thing we are performing, and it's just it's not just a collection of sounds we pronounce. It's something meaningful, and we can describe our past, our future. We can transmit our ideas, our emotions, and we can even lie. Well, psycholinguistics naturally focuses on three areas, now language processing, language acquisition, and neurolinguistics. Language processing answers the question, what happens in the human mind when we speak, listen, write, or read? Why we perceive or remember things differently? Language acquisition is about how people learn the first or the second or just a new language. It deals with critical periods and answers such frequently asked questions. What is the best time to learn a language? Am I too old to learn a foreign language? What to do if I am very bad at languages? What are the best strategies to learn a new language? How fast is it possible to learn a new language? Is it possible to learn in 10 days, 2 weeks, or is it enough to put a dictionary just under the pillow or a grammar book and go to bed and just overnight you will remember everything? Neurolinguistics deals with the physical processes in the mind, the human brain, while producing or acquiring a language. It covers the brain centers and the whole mapping of a language in the brain. It studies brain development and functioning in respect to language and different type of language disorders due to development or brain injuries. In other words, it answers the question, where is that button which I could possibly scratch or press if I want to learn a new language? And just a very short geography of our brain, what happens while we are speaking. When we look at the processes from the perspectives of a language and from neuroscience, we see that there is so-called the thinking cap in our brain, our cortex. It is for ideas and for thoughts. It gives us picture of reality, and there are 2/3 of neurons there. They make a forest of neurons, the whole network of cells, and every language has got its own forest of neurons. So every time we learn a new language, every time we make new connections. So if there are billions of neurons, every neuron makes a connection with 50,000 other neurons. So this is the picture under the microscope. And if we look clearly, there is a space between two neurons, and this space is called synapses. And molecules are transferred to another neuron, and that catches it with a gate. So this way, every time we activate, if we learn something, we activate our brain. So that means that we make more and more connections in terms of syntax, in terms of morphology, in terms of phonology, in terms of semantics. So all these things create different mappings, different networks. And that means that we
Is Rūta still talking? I think it froze a little bit.
Yeah, we have a communication problem.
Yes, we have communication problems. Yes, I actually had a couple questions for Rūta, but maybe while in our connections will restore, I have a question about these neural connections and why do you think they are beneficial?
Okay, Rūta is back. Yeah.
Okay, Rūta. So you were frozen for a little bit, and meanwhile, when I had a question about these neural connections, why exactly are they beneficial in our lives? Maybe not only for language learning, but in general. These new neural connections in the process. Why?
Now, well, you see that one of the things that our brain functions is because of neurons. So dementia showed that when we lose a part of neurons, we can rebuild. If we suffer some injury, again, our brain is rather flexible and it builds. And this way, when we learn something new, it doesn't matter whether this is a language or whether this is playing a music instrument, but in a way, a language is a very good thing because actually it involves a lot of processes, from physical ones to mental ones. And while building these neural connections, we develop our thinking in general. And now this way we can delay our aging.
Yes, yes, I think that was very detailed map and very detailed explanation of psycholinguistics, a very rich psycholinguistics field. I'm a little bit curious now, not necessarily maybe about language relation to the processes in our brain, but language relation to geographic location of where that language is spoken. Does it have any influence on lexical items? Any influence at all, like in which region of the world particular language is spoken and its particular language system? I don't know, maybe Jurgis or Axel Holvoet would have some thoughts on that.
Yes, okay, maybe I could start. Yeah, it's a tough question, actually. There were some studies that attempted to, let's say, link the altitude to some linguistic phenomena or the dryness of the air, but we do not have sort of decisive conclusion, at least at the moment. But what we are sure about is that certainly the area a given language is located at is certainly important and plays a factor, but mostly due to neighboring languages. So we know that, first of all, of course, many languages can be defined in terms of genetic relationships, so that they form families and then have smaller units like genera and groups, etc. But even when languages are not genetically related, but they let's say live in the same neighborhood for quite many years, they acquire similar traits. For example, of course, Europe is dominated by Indo-European languages, but these Indo-European languages that ended up in Europe or spreading in Europe have a number of common features. So, so I would say that we really know a lot about area linguistics and how the languages develop common traits, not necessarily because of their genetic affiliation, but because they are neighbors. So this is known for sure, but maybe we'll know the relation to the particular geographic locations in the future.
If I may add a few words, as Jurgis said, we don't really have any decisive evidence about the influence of our natural environment on our, let's say, our sound system. But what seems to be, this is also something Jurgis pointed out, language contacts are very important. So a lot depends on whether a language is spoken in an area with many migrations, a spread area, because in those areas you have many language contacts. On the other hand, if you live in an area if a language functions in an area where populations have been stable over the centuries, this has certainly a certain influence on language structure. A very interesting example of this is the languages of the Caucasus. The Caucasus is a linguistically extremely rich area with an enormous linguistic differentiation, with languages limited to just one village, for example. And it's, well, this stability contributes, as it seems, to increasing complexity. All the Caucasian languages have a very complex grammatical system. They also have very complex sound systems. And these things are very difficult to maintain in a spread area. There are many contacts between languages because these contacts tend to eliminate rare features, and they, well, usually lead to a certain simplification of the language system.
Yeah, in terms of semantics, actually, there are also differences, and we encountered quite an interesting thing when we put some traits, for example, to animals, personification, and we realized that quite different animals have got different features, and this is so interesting when you look across different cultures. For example, a goat. In Lithuanian, it has the meaning of being stubborn. Now, in English, I heard the meaning of trying everything little by little. If you have tried many activities, so it's the goat that takes one leaf from a tree, another from a bush, then again from something, and those people that try a lot of activities, they really are called goats. In Brazil, who speak Portuguese, they said that a goat is a very, very positive attribute to a person because a goat is an animal that manages to survive on rocks just from a very small amount of grass. And for this reason, people who do not need a lot of income to survive are called goats, and this is a very, very positive thing. So actually, geographic area somehow shapes the way we see animals, the way we attribute or project our human traits to animals. And it's quite interesting to watch this.
Yes, and you, Lecturer Sirvydė, mentioned that just now geographical area influences the way we see, I think you said animals, yes, but doesn't it influence also the way we conceptualize various concepts like time, good, bad, how we can tell? Is it possible to tell, or is it just still just a hypothesis?
No, it isn't. It isn't a hypothesis. It's really like this. I looked over emotions from cognitive linguistic perspectives, and I found quite interesting absolutely different pictures, how, for example, English and Lithuanians conceptualize fear. And I found actually that I tried even to draw some pictures out of what is described in the language. If you allow me to share, just I will show those pictures and you will see the difference. What a huge difference is just out of what we really imagine, what we see. And I found that farming background is, well, here it is now. And you see that fear is a being in English, looks like a human being with many eyes and in straitjacket. Fear in Lithuanian looks like, I do not know who or what, actually an insect, I should say, or a worm, it has huge eyes, baimės akys didelės, baimė graužia, baimė sklando, baimė čiuptuvus turi, baimė apninka. So we see that an abstract notion, such an abstract concept such as fear might be seen absolutely differently, and the language reflects this. This is our worldview.
Yes, that is, I think that is something what not every day we reflect on how our language reflects our reality. But
That's right. That's right. And again, when we count different kind of, let's say, expressions of joy, for example, we see that Lithuanians cry 7 times more frequently than English do. So we do not laugh, we cry out of joy, for example. When we take disgust, we have the opposite situation, that British, for example, experience it 4 times more frequently than Lithuanians. So this is how we see the world. This is how the world is encoded into our language.
Yes, and talking about different cultures, different languages. So I think maybe that was when you froze. But when is this best time when we want to learn language? What is this best time to learn language?
Yes, I constantly hear this question because I've got a lot of people who say, am I too old, or is my baby too small to learn another language, especially in those international families, what to do, and something like this. Well, there are critical periods to learn a language, and this period is described in different ages, but there is no common agreement of which period is the best. What we really know now, the younger you start learning, the better, because our brain is like a sponge and we take everything. This is a very good comparison, is that when we are born, we open the window to learn a language, any language, absolutely. And little by little, we close this window, but that window is never shut. So it is never late to learn a language. And if you think it is too late, think about yourself in 10 years and you will be much older then.
Well,
so it's time.
Now I will want to address similar questions. So, Professor Holvoet, is it true? Is it true? Is it, well, of course, age is just one of many factors influencing our process of language learning. But how was this languages learning process for you? Maybe you learned all of them in the earliest years, or it just came naturally and you were motivated?
I think it's a habit. Once you're in the habit of learning new languages, it gets easier because you know what to look out for, you know what the kinds of problems may be, etc. So once you've got started, you just go on and on, I think. Although the certain limits are imposed on this by the time you can you can devote to this.
And talking about languages further, at the very beginning, Professor Axel, I think you mentioned that linguists are only interested in natural languages. Why? Why they ignore artificial languages?
Well, that is, I think, the definition of linguistics. I think linguists still operate with the basic assumption that was formulated more than 100 years ago by the founding father of linguistics, Ferdinand de Saussure. Language is a system of signs. So you have this notion of
language.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry. Maybe you language as a system of meaning construction, something communication,
yes,
making,
exactly.
doing tasks, and everything.
Exactly.
So would it be?
Yes. If I may just finish. So we said natural languages and human languages. Of course, that's the definition of a linguist's job. But of course, we can. You could say, well, animal languages are also animal communication systems are also signs or systems of symbols. So why not study them? And this is indeed a very good question. So linguists should not ignore, or they should not a priori assume a rigid line of division between human communication, animal communication. Animals may be cleverer than we are inclined to think. But I think there's a very clear line of division between linguistics, which deal with language as a function of the human brain, and the whole of artificial languages created by mathematicians, logicians, which are designed not so much to understand how language functions in humans, how humans communicate, how language functions in the brain. They are more concerned with philosophical concepts, how to formulate the truth conditions of utterances and the like, and these are not the concerns. These are also interesting concerns, but not. They don't belong to the job of a linguist.
Yes. I think that only proves this very huge field and of linguistics, all of it.
In my view, because
yes.
Sorry, Jurgis. I just want to say this view is not necessarily universal. You've got people dealing with language philosophy and formal semantics, and they would also say what we are doing is also linguistics, but not from my point of view.
Hi, Jurgis. I think wanted to.
And I wanted just to add something with respect to artificial things. What's very interesting is happening currently is that we get more and more linguistic data produced by machines. So that the languages are, well, let's say, originally human, Lithuanian, English, French, Chinese, Russian, etc. But currently, more and more texts are translated by the machines, which are trained on certain models, and they use the neural networks. And then I also, just myself, when I was analyzing some Lithuanian data, I came up, with the translation, what looked like artificial, right? So currently, the linguist, and more so in the future, will also have to deal with, let's say, originally human languages, but utterances constructed by the machines, actually, or due to translation, or just by the algorithm that construct small text at the moment, but they will be able to construct much larger text in the future. And in some cases, we will notice that this is the study of, let's say, the machine produced translations and the constructions which are found, let's say, in these. But sometimes we wouldn't know, and we would just study, let's say, Lithuanian, English, Chinese in this hybrid environment. So that part of the utterances will be produced by humans, part of them will be produced by
Yes,
the
I'm very.
machine. We'll have to take this into account. So that we would say this is, let's say, this is the construction, particular or collocation found in the machine translations.
Yes, I'm very happy that you brought up this machine translation field area into our discussion, because right before our discussion I was a little bit listening to previous discussion, and it was about LIAPA 2 project, I think, and the discussant, the person said that now, if previously students, if you would ask student previously why would he or she came to study anything at the Faculty of Philology, he or she would say that I don't like math. And now it's not the case, not necessarily the case. He said that not liking math, it's not the sole and only reason for choosing philology, any philology related studies, because it's coming there. So would you agree that this view of I don't like math, so I will study philology, is very relevant today, or not so much relevant, or it depends how you would see philology studies, well, in our terms, like any linguistical studies nowadays? Is it changing a little bit, or?
A very interesting question. Actually, as far as I noticed, those that are very good at mathematics, they are quite good at grammar as well. And so there is some kind of common things between language and again, between natural languages and computer languages, artificial intelligence. So there are lots of common things there. Though it's still worth learning anyway. And I think that a computer or artificial intelligence is a part of our life, and now we need to have a lot of common between our language and not only our language, but language learning of philology and artificial intelligence as well.
Yes, I see that somebody has one question. So Arnold, one of the students, he wants to ask Professor Pakerys a question, and the question is that maybe you can share the most interesting finding in the field of typology.
Yeah, that's a tough question, because many things found in the typological field are interesting. Well, actually, I'm always fascinated by the findings which are kind of theoretically predicted, and then they are found in reality. So one of the simple examples would be when we are thinking about word order in the transitive construction, where we have the subject, verb, and object. So we have 3 elements, and in theory there are 6 possible combinations. And it's fascinating that they are all attested, right? So all 6 of them. Of course, some languages have some undetermined or undetermined word order, or the word order in transition. So one interesting finding in this case is that all of these 6 constellations are actually attested. But another thing is that there's 2 models, SOV, subject, object, verb, and SVO, subject, verb, object, the most common in languages of the world. And it tells us something about sort of the general preference of human languages, let's say, to place the subject before the verb. So yeah, so that would be just one of the examples, but I'm always fascinated by some stuff which is predicted and actually found, and which tells us more about our human communication.
Yes.
But I guess Axel could equally well answer this question. I guess Axel, I could ask Axel. Maybe he has some.
Yes, that's what I wanted
topic
to.
of typology. Because actually, I should say I would not be interested in typology if not for Axel. So I listened to Axel, some of Axel's lecture. Unfortunately, too few, but then he has very fascinating seminars when I was a PhD student. So I learned about typology from Axel. So it's a question to Axel, actually.
Yes, I am a little bit afraid to ask Axel, because I can imagine how many interesting discoveries Professor Holvoet had in his linguist life. But still, maybe you can tell us about one or two, or first that comes to your mind, interesting findings in the field of typology, Professor Holvoet.
Well, I must say I'm mainly a consumer of typology. I'm not someone who does field work, who goes to some country of Amazonia to some part of Amazonia to study to unknown language. So I'm basically a consumer of typology rather than a real typologist. It's very difficult to to pinpoint one particular fact. It's what you learn when you get into typology is basically it's a new way of looking at languages. Because you're often inclined to think, oh, this language is very different from mine, and people speaking this language, they probably think differently from me, and well, this is actually a very widespread view. There's a whole theory about that, the theory of linguistic relativism. Languages carve out reality in different ways. Agli mentioned this at the start, but when you get into typology, it's one of the things you realize is how much languages actually have in common. In terms of the tasks the languages have to perform. And at this point, I would like to get back to what Rūta was saying about the differences between the concepts of different languages. This is, of course, a very complex discussion between linguists. Some linguists see universals everywhere. Other linguists are inclined to emphasize to see the differences. Rūta is inclined to see the differences, the cultural factors influencing linguistic diversity. Personally, I'm more inclined to see what's common. Of course, you have both things in language, because language is a mix. It's culture and nature. It's culture and biology. So what's culturally determined will be different in different cultures. What's determined by our biology, by social structures, which are basically similar all over the world, is universal. So languages all over the world perform the same tasks. And typology is actually learns you a lot about not only diversity, but also the common elements in human language.
Yes.
It was a very general answer. Sorry, it would get too technical if I would give you a concrete example.
I still would like to make sure, what does it mean? Well, you said that I am a consumer of typology. Mm-hmm. What did you mean? what does it mean to be a consumer of typology?
Yes, well, a real typologist is a linguist who poses a problem. Now, how is this or that in the languages of the world? And then she or he will start to with compiling a sample, because how many languages are there in the world?
Around
classical
7,000.
question, 7,000, something like that. So it's a hopeless task. You can't study them all. Besides, many languages are inaccessible. Somewhere in Amazonia, they have never been described. Many languages have become extinct, and we know nothing about them. But so you have to compile a sample, let's say 100 languages, 200 languages, or 50 languages, and then you have to get at the information, asking people, oh, you're a specialist of this language. Could you tell me how that is in the language you have studied? Or you could ask a native speaker of that language, and so on. And in that sense, I'm not a typologist. Neither is Jurgis. I think Jurgis and I are both consumers. So we read the typological literature, and we try to incorporate this into the way we look at particular languages. Both Jurgis and I do a lot of work on Lithuanian, for example. So a typological perspective helps you to see different things in Lithuanian, which you wouldn't have noticed if you didn't have this background.
Yes. So now we heard about different aspects about typology, but what about psycholinguists, lecturer Sirvydė? Maybe you remember some of the most interesting findings in that field, or most recent, or.
Now, for me personally, it was a discovery, about those critical periods, and it was a huge relaxation when I found that up to age 16, approximately, plus minus, you learn phonetics. Later on, you may learn grammar. At an old age, you may learn grammar even better than while you are younger, but you cannot master phonetics. And this is why we always speak with an accent, our native accent, if we learn a little bit later. But if we speak with an accent, it doesn't mean that we think with an accent. These are two different things, absolutely. And I totally agree with Dr. Holvoet that we look at our language a little bit differently from perspectives of another language. We see things which we never notice. For example, I noticed just by chance some things in my native Lithuanian. For example, English have got a phrase to fall in love, which is quite natural. And in Lithuanian, it is įsimylėti. Now, įsivažiuoti, įsijausti. This is some kind of an inertia. And they fall ill, fall in love. Does it mean that we feel differently? Or, for example, this self-service, which was so funny for my students who tried to learn English. For example, in Lithuanian, we've got our haircut. This is nusikirpau plaukus, nukirptis. We never do ourselves there, never. Or, for example, which is a horrible thing when you think, pasidariau operaciją, išsioperavau. Goodness me. Or, for example, some lexical items when we learned, saldus varškės sūrelis. Have you ever tried it salty? Never. It should be saldelis or varškiukas, I do not know. Well, but these things which you notice when you try to teach others and when you put two languages together. And the way we speak from the psycholinguistic point of view, we may slow down a little bit and see. I will give you a very short experiment. Just answer 4 questions only. How do we call a thing or device which enables us to see very small items, very small objects?
Magnifying glass or
even
microscope?
smaller objects?
Microscope.
A microscope, exactly. What is it? How do we call that thing which enables us to see very far away?
Telescope.
In the space. That's right. And how do we call this device or thing which enables us to see what is above the water if we are in a submarine?
Periscope.
And how do we call a thing or device which enables us to see what is on the other side of the wall?
On the other side of the world?
Wall.
Oh, on the wall. Mm-hmm.
A hole in the wall.
Behind the wall is scope.
It's a window.
Okay.
So this is how our brain works. When I started microscope, telescope, periscope, and you are looking for something ope. So all morphology is there. Now, one more trial, very short, even shorter one. How do we call people who love alcohol a lot, too much?
Alcoholics.
That's right. How do we call people who love work too much?
Workaholics.
How do we call people who drink Fanta, not cola, too much?
Fantastic.
Fantastic, that's right. So you are fantastic today.
Yes, that is a very good example about how we relate and keep going. And talking about that, it makes me to read one more question, which we have from a student. And now we have a question from a student to Professor Holvoet. You mentioned that linguist dedicates his whole life into language study. But do you think it is better to study unrelated languages or one particular family of languages? Professor Holvoet.
That depends. If you want to go into comparative linguistics, historical comparative linguistics, then you could, as many people do, limit yourself to the Indo-European languages, which is the language family to which most European languages belong. But if you're interested in general linguistics, linguistic typology, it's obviously better to study unrelated languages from different continents, from different language families. That's one. Unrelated languages, but also languages from different parts of the world, different continents, because as Jurgis already said, neighboring languages influence each other. So as one famous typologist, the Swedish scholar Östen Dahl, has said, if you want to understand why a language is as it is, the best thing to do is to look at the neighboring languages. So you should, try to study some exotic language, for example. Sorry. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So it depends. It depends on
Yes.
on the person. and on its motivation. Now, I'm very curious. Also, maybe one of the last questions, or maybe not. But I just want to make sure that that we are able to maybe talk and reveal that what is that main reason that keeps you curious about your research subject? What is this thing or these things that keeps you going, digging into this particular field of linguistics, of where you are researching? So is it anything, I don't know, any results that you are expecting, any particular theoretical approach and curiosity? What is this that keeps you curious about your research subject? It's maybe not a very easy question, but I don't
well,
know.
we could start from Rūta, for example, and then Jurgis.
Okay, okay, then Rūta and Jurgis and his cats, and then Holvoet and his cat.
Now I've got two fields. I'm interested in cognitive linguistics, and actually every time I find something interesting, when you dig deeper into a language, you find so many things, even about your native language, which you really know. You find so many things that you were not aware of. For example, emotions. I always had thought that sadness is a very negative emotion. No, for Lithuanians, for surely not, because it's bright, it's transparent, it's gentle, and so many expressions, and you realize, then you see that this is all over our life, in every situation, that all kind of festivals, holidays are a little bit sad, but now I know at least that we are very fond of sadness, and the more we cry at a movie, the better movie is, and we enjoy this, and then you find more and more and more, and you get addicted. You get what is that word? What you say? Workaholics. So typology, typoloholic. Now maybe in this field, and naturally, from the point of view of psycholinguistics, you see it in a practical way, how it affects, at what a stage, now what effect it has on a human understanding, behavior, different kind of commercial things. Why, for example, cookies have one name, and let's say bubble gum or ice cream has got another name. Now you see that it is very closely related to the language, to our sounds, how we understand, and there are so many interesting findings everywhere, on every corner, I should say. Now, for me personally.
And what about Professor Jurgis Pakerys?
Yes, I think I'm mostly fascinated by let's say, by attempting at answering some questions. I wouldn't say, in many cases you just can't give straightforward answers. But so first of all, most of working with the Baltic languages. So first of all, I'm interested in the question how certain meanings are conveyed by certain constructions in the Baltic languages, and then, if I'm able, I sometimes try to answer the question how this construction is developed. So I think I'm mostly fascinated by the historical question, but at least for me it's a tough one. Just telling how certain construction is developed is quite tough. So I think I'm mostly moved by these two two things, trying to explain how certain meanings are conveyed in the Baltic languages and how these ways, these constructions developed.
Yes, deep into the structure. And Professor Holvoet.
Can I give a question to
Sorry.
To Professor Pakerys?
Sorry.
Just about historical linguistics a little bit. I read that our sayings about with numerals 9, barbė, devindarbė, devynia matai, 10 badas, 9 kartus pamatuok, 10 kirsk. Everything that includes number 9 is just pre-Christian sayings, because this is a pagan magical
3 times 3. Like 3 times 3.
Has it got some scientific grounding, or is it just a theory? What do you think?
I think I cannot give you just a simple answer, but yes, it's related to this number symbolism, and I would not say this is just Lithuanian. It's just first of all, I would look at this question from the typological point of view, and look at various let's say meanings or attributes related to, let's say, the number 9. Yes, we know that it's there in folklore, but yes. So first of all, I would look for confirmations in Latvian. Yeah, the Prussian data are limited, and I would look for the Finnic context, etc. So, yeah, these need to be checked.
Yes, and Axel.
Yes, well, for me, linguistic research is a very intuitive thing. My interest in linguistics is not primarily, testing or confirming some particular linguistic theory, the theory of generative grammar or construction grammar. That's interesting, of course, in itself. And after many years of linguistic research, one gets one's view on which, language theory reflects the facts of language best. But what attracts me personally is the intuitive aspects. Using language is something intuitive in itself. The speakers of any language, Lithuanian or any other language, they have a language system. They apply rules of language, but they are unable to formulate these rules. Lithuanian can use past tense forms without making any mistakes, but she or he would be unable to explain how this works. So the knowledge of language is based on intuition. It's intuitive, but the linguist's job also. So linguistics is for me about understanding linguistic patterns. Basically the same thing Jurgis was talking about, and it's not something you can construct by using statistic methods. Most discoveries in linguistics, in my view, are based on intuition. And I think basically it's a bit the same in physics or in any other science, and it's this intuitive aspect that attracts me.
So thank you, Professor Holvoet. So you mentioned intuition, yes. And it brings me to another question, which we have. Somebody asked a question: what happens with our brain when we start dreaming in different languages? For example, when we have a dream where we speak another language. I don't know, maybe Rūta.
Yes. It's a question for Rūta. For the psycholinguists.
I realize this means only one, that you had a language exposition for a long time and you are trying hard to learn a new language. By the way, an interesting fact that most people that dream in another language, they never speak with an accent. And though they speak with a horrible accent in real life. Now sleep in general is very important for our brain because it's the processing, digesting the information actually we got during our daytime. So those that think that it's important only to learn, for example, something, or to work and without sleeping, now, well, they should think twice, because it's the same as eating without having time to digest everything. So I do not know. Let's ask everyone, do they really dream in another language? Dr. Holvoet, have you ever dreamt? In which language do you dream?
I don't know really. I couldn't tell you.
And then
talking about dreams, there's an interesting typological fact about dreams. There are languages in which people use a special grammatical form, a different grammatical form, when they talk about what they have done and experienced in their dreams. So when you're talking about real life, yesterday I met somebody, it's one grammatical form. When you relate your dreams, it's a different form, because perhaps it's a different person that was acting and experiencing in this dream, or perhaps it was some god who put this dream into our heads. Perhaps somebody else was dreaming in us. So that's what something typology can tell us something about. But about languages, I think I use different languages, but I've never really thought about it.
That's so interesting that you mentioned that maybe somebody else dreams, because Arnold also asked a question about, does our personality change when we speak? Does personality change when we speak different language? So maybe we know that our personality change when we dream in different language. But perhaps, what about speaking? What about speaking different language? Does our personality or maybe voice would change when we speak different one? What could be some insights about that? I don't know, maybe Sirvydė, lecturer Sirvydė, you could also...
Well, I haven't noticed, to tell you the truth, that our personality changes. The exception is with my students who really don't know English well, and they start speaking very quietly then, so then their voice changes. But what I really noticed, another thing, that not personality, that we pick a different accent, and we for example, give a different stress to sound now, for example, more English or more German or something like this. And instead of Panevėžys, some people say Panevėžys, just though they are Lithuanians, just to pretend they are foreigners, or they speak without an accent. No, sorry, I haven't noticed that our personality changes, or let's say that...
Voice tone, what about voice tone? So, I heard some people say that I speak like higher pitch, lower pitch when I speak other language, but
no scientific research on this. So maybe these are individual cases only.
It's our identity. We want to identify with this medium.
That's right. That's
American.
Right. That's right. Because lots of languages have their now intonations, and which are quite different. Some languages are in general intonational. For example, Chinese or Mandarin. Now we see that even English is different. British English is different from American one, and now their intonation is different. So then, yes, we try to be more natural, we try to adapt to those people, and we try to speak their intonation. But that is all. That is all.
Yes, and
But sorry, but
yes.
depends on what you mean by personality. But I think personality is in part nature and in part nurture. So the part that is nurture, which is in part culturally defined, should change according to the language community in which you live at a certain moment. So you have certain after a certain time in another country, you notice there are things you'd better not say, or you'd better say in a more cautious way than you would do in your native country, or the other way around. So this is perhaps also a part of your personality.
Yeah, by personality or identity, I don't know, can we use them as parallel terms, or these might be two different terms? Or...
Well, identity, yes, personality. I don't know what this personality really is.
That's maybe
you would need a psychologist, perhaps.
Yes, that's maybe terms in linguistics. Well, of those linguistical sciences which look for differences rather than similarities across different linguistic behavior. Okay, so we were talking about psycholinguistics, about typology. I wanted to say generative grammar, but more like language typology. And I still would like, I still have one more question, and maybe that is for Professor Holvoet, or maybe also for Rūta Sirvydė, about our personal experience, about do you have any personal funny stories to share while being in different culture, learning to speak different languages, mixing up languages, or mixing languages while speaking and or translating, etc. So this everyday language user funny experience, did it happen somewhere, or if anything comes to your mind?
We are teachers. We are teachers, and that means we lost the sense of humor in this field. And I once was probably, that was in Belgium, when they said, "Are you a teacher?" I said, "Can you see this from my face?" No, they said, "You do not laugh at our mistakes." So probably this is the way we are trained already, that we do not laugh, and there are no funny stories. But still, I noticed our cultural identity in a little bit different context when I was asked in Spain, "Are you a typical Lithuanian?" And I didn't know what to say. I'm not blonde. I haven't got blue eyes, what we usually imagine about a typical Lithuanian woman. And I said, no, I am not, because I hate sadness, after all. I love joy. But during that conference of applied metaphor, actually, we were put, we two Lithuanians went together with Japanese in one bus, and we went to have our accommodation in a hostel, and well, we got good news from the host of the conference, from the organizers, who said that the hostel will be free and our accommodation will be free. And what happened? Our Spanish organizer got at loss. "Aren't you happy?" Japanese said, yeah, we are. and it's good. We rubbed our hands, but now, well, so they were so disappointed that we didn't jump or didn't show our excitement. We went to our rooms, and then another bus arrived with Latin Americans, with the Americans from the United States, and just of a sudden, a huge noise. Wow! We realized, well, they were told the news, good news. And this shows that now such kind of behavior, little by little, gets into our language. And even though we think we are not typical ones, we behave typically. If Lithuanians are reserved in general, and I was reserved in such a situation. And little by little, we start speaking in such a manner. We construct our metaphors, metonymies, different kinds of expressions according to our behavior and what we feel. So those that believe they are not typical, think twice. In another context, probably, you will be absolutely typical Lithuanian, typical American, typical Belgian, typical, I don't know, any nationality.
Yes,
Dr.
I can really relate to what you said about being Lithuanian in Lithuanian, being Lithuanian in another country, and then coming back from another country to try to be Lithuanian again. So but what about Professor Holvoet?
I can't remember any particular funny stories because I have made notes, but I could probably give you lots of funny examples. I don't mix up languages in everyday life, but when you're under a strain, when you have been lecturing for, let's say, 4 or 6 hours, then it gets really tough, and then I start mixing up languages. When I'm lecturing in Lithuanian, I start inserting English or Polish fragments, and sometimes I notice my students are smiling at me or looking at me in bewilderment, and then I think, oh, there I've been mixing up languages again.
So in which language, when you go to the store, in which language you think your shopping list? Or in all of them? When, for example, was it any situation when you go to the store and just think about what you need to get in Lithuania, but in all the other languages except Lithuanian?
I think the surroundings determine the way you think. So in Lithuania, I think in Lithuanian.
Yes.
If you go to another country, after a certain time, probably start thinking in a different language.
Yes.
That's my impression.
Yes.
I've remembered one funny story with my Turkish students who were so surprised to find out that there exists grammatical gender in Lithuanian. So when I said a table is masculine, a chair is feminine, oh dear, they started laughing so much. They looked under the table, looked under the chair. How do you know it is? How do you decide? And something like this, they nearly burst with tears out of laughing. So things that are so natural for us are so funny for foreigners.
And vice versa, I guess.
Yeah, probably that's right.
And Professor Pakerys, do you have any funny experience from your polyglot or foreign language using life?
I'm not a polyglot.
Okay.
Speak few languages. Maybe I think it was funny. I studied in the United States for a year. It was back in 1997, I think. Well, I don't know about the level of English I had, but it was quite enough for studying. But my surprise came in the dining hall. I remember I had really funny stuff probably for a week. It's like you know the language, but you don't really know the dishes, right? The objects there. So you just go there. And I think it took me quite a while to adapt, to the reality, like all the Asian food that was available, less known to me, or the Mexican food. And it was sort of an interesting, I would say, linguistic moment. Like you go in the queue, and it's a stressful situation, and just basically you just point to the things, and you should be able to name them, right? But this is a context you are completely new, and you were never taught to be, let's say, in this context, and you were never trained. So it was quite funny. I just don't remember, but I had these funny combinations, and these funny looks that guy is asking, to put that sauce on or something on the top of something, which never happened. So it was quite funny.
And although it happened quite a few years ago, it's these things that we remember. But yes, we don't remember how we succeeded and how we successfully used it, but we remember our failures. Not failures, but our learning process.
Yeah, tough time.
Yes.
And Dagle, what about you? Have you got some funny experience?
Yes, I did quite. Yes, well, maybe I can just mention one, but it was like a reverse cultural experience when I was living 3 years abroad in the US, and I came back to Lithuania, and I was in a group of people. Maybe it was some work event, I don't really remember, and started going to everybody, doing this small talk in Lithuanian, which is not our thing at all, for example. So I got, somebody mentioned that you act differently, for example, or other thing that when I got into public transport, I smiled at the people which I don't know. And then I remember this person's look at me like I am this creepy person smiling, because once you get into public transport here, you have to choose your spot through the window and look at it. And don't you dare look anywhere else, especially smile. So that was these cultural reflections about our culture. But I have one last comment, and I think I will speak for all when I say that if somebody who watched this and got very curious about some aspect of this rich universe of linguistics, and maybe is considering to get a deeper knowledge in linguistics by studying it, but maybe still has some questions or doubts, or still would like to, I don't know, ask some questions, that feel free to drop an email to any relevant department, institute people, to us as a faculty and people of philology faculty. So that was my one of the things that I really wanted to make sure to say. Yes, and maybe we have some more questions or comments. I don't know, maybe Veronica Valeria has prepared anything, because if not,
well, no, we don't have any more questions.
I think it's,
so maybe we can stop